The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed in the stark prison hallway. Richard slumped in his chair, his hands clasped tightly around the letter he had just received. After years behind bars, there was finally a glimmer of hope. His parole had been granted. He was free to walk the streets again, free to leave the cold cement walls, but most importantly, free to return to the one person he had left behind, his 8-year-old daughter, Emily. The prison guards came to get him shortly after the news. They led him through the narrow corridors that had become his home for nearly a decade. His heart raced as the gate swung open, and he stepped out into the world he had once known. The sun felt unfamiliar on his skin, too bright, too sharp. But it didn't matter. He was going home. The ride to the orphanage where Emily had been staying felt like an eternity. Richard's mind raced through memories of her tiny face, her big eyes, and the sound of her laughter. She had been just a baby when he was locked away, and now she was 8. Would she still remember him? Would she be angry? All he wanted was to hold her again, to make up for the years he had lost. When the car finally stopped in front of the orphanage, Richard's legs were unsteady, but he was determined. He stood, his heart pounding in his chest as he made his way to the door. It swung open, and the woman inside greeted him with a soft smile, though her eyes seemed to carry a trace of sorrow. "Richard, it's good to see you," she said, her voice warm but filled with a sadness he couldn't place. "Emily's been waiting for you." She led him down a long hallway, and he could hear the faint giggles and chatter of children behind closed doors. At the end of the hall, she stopped in front of the door and knocked gently. "Emily!" she called softly, pushing the door open. A small figure sat at the edge of the bed, her head bent low as she played with a doll. Emily's dark hair cascaded down her back, her little fingers gently twirling the doll's dress. When she heard the door creak open, she looked up, and for a brief moment their eyes met. Richard's heart stopped. There was no mistaking those eyes. Those were his daughter's eyes, the same spark of curiosity that had been there when she was a baby. But as he stepped forward, something seemed off. "Emily," he said softly, his voice breaking as he stepped closer. "It's me, Daddy." The little girl blinked in confusion before she stood up, her body tense as she slowly took a few steps forward. She didn't run into his arms, as he had imagined. Instead, she simply looked at him, studying him as if trying to figure out who this man was. I remember you," she whispered, her voice small and uncertain. "But why did you leave me?" Richard's throat tightened. He knelt down to her level, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm so sorry, Emily," he said, his voice trembling. "I had to go away for a while, but I never stopped thinking about you. I never stopped loving you." A moment passed in silence, and then, to Richard's surprise, Emily finally stepped into his embrace, wrapping her small arms around him. His eyes closed as he held her, his heart swelling with emotion. But as he pulled back slightly, his eyes fell on her arms. They were covered in dark, angry bruises. "What happened to your arms, Emily?" His voice shook as he gently took her wrist, lifting her arm to get a better look. Emily flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. "It's nothing," she mumbled, looking down at the floor. Richard's heart sank. Nothing? These bruises were far from nothing. His eyes flickered to the woman who had opened the door. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" The woman's face grew pale, and she hesitated before speaking. It's been hard for Emily. She's had a rough time adjusting since you've been gone. The other children, they're not always kind." Richard's heart pounded in his chest as he looked back at his daughter. "Who did this to you?" Emily remained silent, her eyes focused on the floor. The woman stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's not just the other kids," she said softly. "She's been through a lot more than just bullying. Some things are just too painful to talk about right now." Richard felt his anger rise, his fists clenching at his sides. He had to get to the bottom of this. He would protect his daughter, no matter the cost. His mind raced as he silently vowed that this would never happen again. "Emily," he said, his voice filled with a quiet resolve, "I'm going to take care of you. No one is going to hurt you anymore. Do you understand?" She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with uncertainty, but also a faint glimmer of trust. Richard kissed her forehead gently, his heart aching for the years he had missed. He couldn't change the past, but he could be here for her now. Before he could say anything more, the woman gently placed her hand on his arm again. "Richard, I think you should know," she began, her voice hesitant. "Emily's been asking about her mother. She doesn't remember much, but she knows her mother is gone. And she has questions I don't know how to answer." Richard's blood ran cold. His wife, Emily's mother, had passed away shortly after he was imprisoned. The memories of her death, of that unbearable day, came rushing back. But he couldn't let his daughter see the pain that still haunted him. "I'll answer her questions," he said, his voice firm, though a storm was brewing inside him. "I'll tell her everything she needs to know."